Headlines. U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert leaves hospital after a recent knife attack and says the incident only strengthened the bond between Seoul and Washington. The government points to Korea's weak recovery in domestic consumption. Eyes turn to the Bank of Korea's monetary decision this Thursday. And Apple unveils its latest wearable gadget, Apple Watch, to be available in 9 countries starting next month at a starting price of $349 US. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. We begin with the latest on the injured U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Mark Lippert, who was released from hospital earlier in the afternoon. He told reporters that the Seoul-Washington alliance remains firm. ARIRANG's Hwang Sung-hee has the story.
Scarred but with a huge smile on his face, Ambassador Lippert thanked the South Korean public for their support following last week's brutal knife attack. Speaking to reporters before leaving the hospital on Tuesday, the U.S. envoy said in Korean that the incident will only strengthen ties between Seoul and Washington.
비언되이 되에 땅이 굳어진다.
Ambassador Lippert, who was attacked by a man wielding a knife at a breakfast meeting in central Seoul last week, needed 80 stitches on his right cheek and left arm. The stitches on his face have been removed, but doctors will be visiting his home every day to check on his arm until he is fully recovered. All things considered, the envoy says he feels pretty darn good.
I mean, it was obviously a scary incident, but I'm walking, talking, holding my baby, hugging my wife. So I just feel really good.
But he did hint at a possible change in the security procedures, as many blamed lax security for his injuries. At the time of the attack, the ambassador only had one full-time South Korean bodyguard with him.
But obviously, as people and the State Department in Washington have said, we're going to take a hard look at our techniques, procedures here, and I'll leave it to the security experts to come up with recommendations and policies going forward.
The ambassador, with a mix of Korean words, asked the South Korean public to treat him as they had done before the incident, as the guy next door and Sejun's dad.
I will still be a 동네 아저씨 and Sejuni Appa, as people here in Korea have called me.
Despite the appalling incident, Ambassador Lippert said that he wants to return to the job as soon as possible to advance the alliance between their two countries, adding that there will be no changes to their economic, political, and military cooperation. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
A top UN official on North Korean human rights has called for more concerted international efforts to raise awareness about North Korea's crimes against humanity. He says North Korea's past abduction of foreign nationals should be addressed. Connie Kim has more.
A senior human rights investigator at the United Nations is calling for concerted international pressure to get North Korea to address its kidnapping of hundreds of foreign nationals. In a report released on Monday, Marzuki Darusman, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in North Korea, said countries should come together to bring back surviving abductees and shed light on all abduction cases. The strategy laid out in the report calls for efforts to refer the North Korean leadership to the International Criminal Court and a global approach to improve North Korea's dire human rights situation, with the goal of bringing a close to all enforced disappearances by Pyongyang. North Korea's systematic abductions of foreign nationals gained the spotlight with the publication of a UN Commission of Inquiry report last year that said Pyongyang had engaged in abduction as a matter of state policy. The report says North Korean agents have abducted hundreds of foreign nationals, mainly from South Korea, Japan, and China since the 1960s. Adding to the urgency, Darusman said Japanese authorities are investigating 881 possible abduction cases believed to have been carried out by Pyongyang. Japanese authorities have already identified 12 other abductees. Darusman's report will be presented to the Human Rights Council in Geneva next week. Last week, North Korean Foreign Minister Lee Soo-yong, speaking at a UN Human Rights Council meeting, flatly rejected the landmark UN report released last year, calling it politically motivated. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
South Korea is planning to impose some kind of sanctions on the companies that comply with North Korea's recent unilateral wage hike at the inter-Korean factory complex in Kaesong. Seoul's Unification Ministry official told reporters on Tuesday that the government plans to outline the possible legal and administrative steps the firms could face if they give out raised wage payments in March. This follows Pyongyang's decision to up the monthly wage of the North Korean workers at this complex by 5% to $74. Seoul has called for talks on the matter, but the call has so far gone unanswered by the North. Joel Witt, a world-renowned nuclear scientist, had said last month that North Korea could expand its nuclear arms tenfold to around 100 weapons by the year 2020, while another nuclear expert has dismissed that report, saying it's technically impossible for North Korea. Speaking to the Voice of America, a former Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Olli Heinonen, said there is a difference between having the nuclear material for weapons and making the weapons. He added it would be reasonable to assume that Pyongyang can produce 3 to 4 weapons a year. Amid speculation that the U.S. might deploy its missile defense system to South Korea to counter North Korean threats, China is reportedly aiming to block the deployment. The Washington Free Beacon reports that the Chinese President Xi Jinping has tried to persuade South Korean President Park Geun-hye not to accept Washington's moves, citing current and former U.S. officials. The report suggests that Beijing will provide more intimate trade and business chances if Seoul knocks the U.S. back. South Korea's defense ministry reaffirmed Monday that the U.S. has made no request. Seoul says it's working on its own missile defense system that should be ready by 2020. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, on a visit to Japan, urged the country to address its wartime past and reiterated the importance of reconciliation with neighboring countries. This as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe faces mounting pressure from the international community for a wartime apology. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
During the second day of her two-day visit to Japan, German Chancellor Angela Merkel reportedly advised Japan to properly address the issue of the forced sexual enslavement of Asian women during World War II. Japan-based Kyodo News reports that Merkel emphasized the importance of reconciliation between Japan and Korea during her meeting with the leader of Japan's opposition Democratic Party, Kazuya Okada. Merkel added that it's important to face the problems of the past in response to Okada's concerns about a lack of reconciliation with Japan's neighboring countries, mainly Korea and China. A day before, she had urged Japan to face its wartime atrocities, referring to Germany's reconciliatory efforts after World War II. Merkel's latest remarks have been seen as a call for change and the lukewarm attitude currently taken by the administration of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe toward acknowledging Japan's wartime atrocities. And she's not the only one pressuring Japan to offer an apology. Korea's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Do Gang-il said on Tuesday that the country expects Japan to build trust with its neighbors by making courageous efforts to face up to its history, just as Germany did after World War II. Also, U.S. Representative Mike Honda has said that Abe should not be allowed to appear before the U.S. Congress without repenting for the country's wartime history. In February, Abe had conveyed his wish to address Congress, and if he does, he will become the first Japanese prime minister to do so. Prime Minister Abe is set to issue a statement in August to mark the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, but there's speculation that he'll try to water down Japan's wartime atrocities. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And upon Merkel's visit to Tokyo, a German newspaper slammed Japan for trying to whitewash its past aggressions in Asia. The centrist daily Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung said Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's attempts to water down Tokyo's past apologies are stifling Japan's economic recovery as they're blocking trade to the world's largest export market, China. It also noted that the Abe administration's behavior serves to bring South Korea and China closer together. Kim Young-lan, the woman who first pushed for the recently passed anti-corruption bill, says she does not think it's unconstitutional to include private school teachers and members of the media as subjects in this bill. At a press conference today, the former chair of the Anticorruption and Civil Rights Commission said a survey has found nearly 70% of Koreans think adding the two groups was advisable. While stressing that the bill does not violate the right to equality, Kim added there's a need for measures to protect the freedom of the press. The bill says that public servants, members of the media, and private school and kindergarten teachers will face criminal punishment if they or their spouses are found to have accepted $890 or more worth of money or gifts or special treatment from a person unrelated to their work. Korea's finance ministry says the country's recovery momentum is not strong enough, pointing to a need for a more stimulus measures. Now, with the government pledging to pour money into the economy in the first half of this year, all eyes are on whether the central bank will cut its key rate. Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea's major economic indicators were all down this year. Output, consumption, and exports all plunged, while consumer prices would also have marked a drop if it were not for a tobacco price hike. The finance ministry is expressing concerns, saying the country's recovery momentum is still weak. It adds that lingering uncertainties abroad, like a weak Japanese yen and a possible rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve, also pose a threat to the domestic economy. To prop up growth, the government has announced a $9 billion stimulus package for the first half of this year and called on the corporate sector to raise their wage levels, which will in turn boost domestic demand. Given the efforts made by the government, market expectations are mounting for the central bank to cut its key rate in the coming months.
There's a high possibility that the Bank of Korea will cut the rate in April as it revises down its growth outlook for the Korean economy.
The Bank of Korea will set its key rate for this month on Thursday. Attention is now focused on the central bank's next move, as the prospect of another rate cut also prompts concerns about the country's snowballing household debt. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
Greece is set to hold technical talks with its creditors in Brussels on Wednesday on its €240 billion bailout program. Eurozone finance ministers are treating this matter with urgency. Shun Se-min reports.
European finance ministers are impatient, saying there is no time to lose. The troubled Greece is quickly running out of funds and must repay its IMF loan installment by the end of the month. Europe's finance ministers have criticized Greece for wasting time. Chairing a meeting with Eurozone finance ministers on Monday, Dutch Finance Minister Jeroen Dijsselbloem said technical talks on further funding for Greece would start on Wednesday. The Eurogroup chairman says Eurozone member nations are ready to support Greece if it continues on the economic reform path.
The talks have to start rather today than tomorrow, and we shouldn't waste so much time. The extension is only for 4 months, and the time is ticking away.
The Eurozone agreed last month to extend Greece's bailout program until June, and it is hoping to approve a detailed list of reforms by next month. So far, Athens has only outlined its proposals in broad terms, describing 7 reforms it wants to launch. The proposal will be soon discussed with the 3 institutions dubbed the Troika: the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF. In the meantime, the ECB began its €1 trillion quantitative easing program on Monday as Europe's national central banks began picking up the debts of their own governments. The euro fell to its lowest level against the US dollar in 11.5 years on Monday, ending at $1.08.5, spurring talks of euro-dollar parity. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
It was a big day for tech enthusiasts and journalists alike in San Francisco as Apple has unveiled its latest wearable gadget, the Apple Watch. The starting price at $349. Our Chi Myung-gil has more.
It's been 5 years since Apple launched the iPad, and now the company is making a major play for the wearables market with this Apple Watch. The watch comes in 3 different models: the Apple Watch, the Apple Watch Sport, and the high-end Apple Watch Edition. The watch has many integrated features such as the Apple Pay mobile wallet, messaging, calls, health tracking applications, and the ability to connect your watch to a friend's watch. Pre-orders for the watch start April 10th and it will go on sale on April 24th. It will first be available in the US, Australia, China, and Japan, among other countries.
The Apple Watch is the most advanced timepiece ever created.
Apple enters a market already crowded by major tech companies, ranging from Korea's Samsung and LG to China's Huawei and startups such as Pebble. And with the smartwatch market expected to take off this year with projected sales of 28 million units from last year's 4.6 million, mobile manufacturers are pouring their efforts into making their smartwatches better and more visually appealing. Samsung, which had attempted to steal Apple's thunder with the release of its Galaxy Gear in 2013, is planning to release a new smartwatch during the first half of the year. LG surprised many with its Urbane smartwatch, which has the ability to make and receive phone calls without the need for a connected smartphone. Apple requires a connection to an iPhone to be fully operational. Chi Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
The threat of radical extremists has prompted the Arab League to call for a unified force to combat the Islamic State group. To tell us more, Paul Lee is joining us from the News Center. Paul, what would be the focus of this proposed coalition?
Well, the combined force among Arab nations would target IS militants in Iraq and across Syria, as well as other radicalized splinter groups. It echoes similar calls by Egypt's leader to form a pan-Arab military force to help fight the growing threat of terrorism in the region. Meanwhile, IS is reportedly undergoing internal discord amid its rapid expansion. Arirang's Park Ji-won has more.
The Arab League urged its member countries to create a unified Arab force to counter the growing threats from extremists in the region, including the Islamic State group. The remarks came during a 2-day Arab League foreign ministers meeting that started Monday in Cairo.
There is an urgent need for the creation of a multi-purpose common Arab military force able to intervene rapidly to fight terrorism and the activities of terrorist groups.
The creation of the force will top the agenda of the Arab League's 2-day annual summit set to take place in Egypt later this month from the 28th to the 29th. In the absence of a unified force, several Arab League countries, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan, have participated in U.S.-led airstrikes against Islamic State in Syria. Egypt also carried out its own airstrikes on Islamic State targets in Libya after the militant group beheaded 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians last month. Meanwhile, the Islamic State group is reportedly undergoing internal strife in maintaining its unity and ideology amid its rapid expansion. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing interviews with Islamic State defectors, that resentments are piling up among both the Syrian and foreign fighters inside the notorious extremist group, and the number of defections has increased in recent months.
Local members are discontent with the higher salaries and lodging given to foreign fighters, while some foreign fighters voiced opposition to the brutal treatment of civilians, prisoners, and members. Dozens of foreign members who refused to fight or who were caught fleeing from battlefields have reportedly been executed over the past few months. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And shifting to Argentina now, Paul, a deadly helicopter crash has claimed the lives of 10 people, including 8 French nationals. And this is a tragic accident, of course, to say the least. But there's also been a shocking revelation about these victims.
That's right. It's been confirmed that 3 of the passengers that were killed in this crash were some of France's leading sports stars. The sudden loss even prompted President Francois Hollande to describe the incident as a cause for immense sadness, while offering his condolences to the victims' families. They include 3-time Olympic medalist and world-class swimmer Camille Muffat, who won gold at the 2012 London Games. She was only 25 years old. There was also Olympic boxer Alexis Vatine, who was 28 years old. Veteran sailor Florence Artaud also died in the crash. She was best known for being one of the first women to make a name for herself in the world of sailing. Argentine authorities say the accident occurred on Monday near the Andes Mountains when 2 helicopters collided amid good weather. The aircraft were said to be carrying media crews filming a reality TV show. An investigation is underway to determine the cause of the disaster.
And turning now to China, more specifically, its economy. Official figures show its producer prices are continuing their 3-year-long decline, raising fears of damaging deflation. What does this say about China's economic health?
Well, despite a slight uptick in consumer inflation in February, wholesale prices are plunging hard. And according to analysts, it's a sign that the Chinese economy could be getting deeper into trouble as it deals with slowing growth. The National Bureau of Statistics released data on Tuesday showing the country's producer price index declining by a record 4.8% in February compared to a year earlier. It's the steepest fall since 2002, brought upon by sagging external and internal demand.
As the global economy is slowing down, external demand is sagging while the domestic reform is bottlenecked. Demand as a whole has made it impossible to digest the production capacities, giving rise to overcapacity, hence the sustained negative growth in PPI.
Last week, Chinese leaders set this year's economic growth target at about 7%, representing the weakest level in 25 years. Though the central bank has cut interest rates twice in recent months to spur growth, some expect Beijing will need to provide further support to keep deflation at bay.
And an experimental plane will attempt to fly around the world, relying only on power from the sun. What's the current status on this record-breaking flight?
Well, the Solar Impulse 2 took off on its second leg to India earlier on Tuesday after arriving in Oman from Abu Dhabi, where it began its epic journey. Now it's flying over Pakistan as we speak, and so far, all systems are green. The wings of the plane, which span across a Boeing 747 that is, are equipped with 17,000 solar cells, and altogether, but altogether it only weighs just 2.5 tons, or about your average car. 2 Swiss pilots will be at the helm during the unprecedented trip around the world, which seeks to prove that the future of flying is possible without fossil fuels.
We want to show that climate change is a fantastic opportunity to bring on the market new clean technologies that save energy, save natural resources of our planet, make profit, create jobs, and sustain growth.
The full mission is expected to be completed over the next 5 months at an average speed of 50 to 100 kilometers per hour. One of the biggest challenges, however, will be a non-stop 8,500-kilometer stretch from Nanjing, China, across the Pacific to Hawaii, which is expected to take 5 days and nights. Chery?
All right, Paul, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much, for those stories, and we will see you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. We begin with news of dry weather advisories that have been issued for most parts of the country, and the humidity index in parts of Gyeongsang-namdo province have dipped to as low as 9%. At the moment, as you can see, it is mostly clear skies nationwide, but clouds are set to move in tomorrow, so a mix of snow and showers are in store for parts of the Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Jeollanam-do provinces. Looking ahead, cold air will continue to stick around through Thursday morning, plus winds are set to make it feel much colder, so make sure to bundle up when heading outdoors. On to the readings. The daytime high here in the capital hits 7. Daegu, Gwangju, and Busan reach the low teens. Meanwhile, Daejeon and Jeju peak at 8. Dokdo hits 4. Mount Kumgang -7. Those are the updates I have for you now. I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, Po Kyung, and that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.